Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, April 24th, 2014. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Brew in a Bag pioneer Pat Hollingdale and Brew in a Bag enthusiast Bob Stempski join me to talk about the legacy of Brew in a Bag, some of the myths that surround it, and some myths that the technique has helped dispel. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. On Facebook, I am at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. We have a show page on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on the Google Plus, too. And thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of shopping on Amazon, don't go to Amazon first. Go to our website first. Click on our Amazon ad. That will take you to Amazon. You can purchase things as you normally would without paying any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you this show. We greatly, greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own Magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site that work in a similar fashion. Our iPhone app is on iTunes. Our Android app is on Amazon.com. We're in the BlackBerry podcast directory. You can find us on the Windows phone, too. You can check out our brewer's logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front is a blank calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And there is room in the back to log the details of up to 50 batches of beer. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. And thanks to everybody who's done so already. And you can protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. Check those out at basicbrewingshop.com. Our Basic Brewing bottle openers are back in stock, and they're headed out the door again. I appreciate your patience while they were absent. For a limited time, you can get a free bottle opener with the purchase of any of our DVD combos. So that's quite a deal. As promised, last week I posted a Basic Brewing video episode since our past audio show. That was tasty and fun. It featured my Easy Peasy Pilsner and Steve's take on some German food, including frying up some of my homemade sauerkraut. So if you haven't seen that, go and check that out as well. Well, let's get into the meat of the matter, shall we? We talked for a good long time. I've been trying to get together with Pat Hollingdale for quite a while. Bob Stempski introduced me to Pat through email, and we've been working to coordinate a chat, and our work has finally paid off. Pat is apparently the originator of the brew in a bag technique that completely reimagines the way we homebrewers mash our grains. And up until brew in a bag, we were mostly just trying to emulate professional brewing systems, making 3-vessel systems and such in miniature, essentially. Brew in a bag changed the way we think about how we mash our grains. With brew in a bag, all you need is a kettle, a heat source, and a mesh bag, and you're in business. In past shows, you've heard us talk about the details of how to do brew in a bag, and you've seen us do it on the video show as well. But I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk to Pat and Bob about how the technique has affected home brewing over the past few years, and it's how it's affected how we think about what goes on in our kettle/mash tuns. Pat Hollingdale, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks for having me along, James.
And Bob Stempski, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
How's it going, James?
Going very well. It is morning here in the United States, where Bob and I are, and it's evening where Pat is. So Pat is making a bigger commitment than we. Well, I don't know. It depends on what time you get up in the morning, Bob.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Well, let's talk. We're here to talk about brew in a bag, and we know from Bob's appearances on the show that he is a big proponent of brew in a bag. But we are honored and lucky to have Pat Hollingdale, who apparently, Pat, you have had a contribution, if not the contribution, in getting brew in the bag off the ground. Tell us your story.
About 8 years ago on Aussie Homebrew, one of the members there, who goes under the names of James Squire, he he posted a question saying, would it be possible to, do everything in one vessel? And I suppose, luckily at the time, I was at a level of naivety where I didn't know too much, which was great. So a few of us got in and explored it, and one of the existing batch sparges did a full volume mash in his esky, and he found that there were no problems with that. And then I went and did one in a bag, full volume mash in the bag with the one kettle, and off we went from there. So it's been a little bit of a journey, and it's been quite interesting actually. Yeah.
And Bob, where did you get on the brew in a bag train?
Well, I kind of got on it by accident. And I was a 3-vessel brewer, and I started as extract, went to 3-vessel, and I did that for about a year, and then I just thought there would be a different way to do it, and then so I started actually on my own. I was thinking of getting a wire basket and putting it inside the kettle and doing it that way, and I even got as far as picking up aluminum or stainless steel termite mesh to make a bag out of. And just coincidentally, when I was ordering the stuff, I tripped upon Aussie Home Brewer site and started reading on brew in a bag, and I said, wow, this beats everything that I was researching for the last month. And right away, when the craze started, at that time it was a craze, I was right on the bandwagon, and I've been brewing that way ever since.
And nowadays it's so common that it's not controversial at all. But in the beginning, it seems like the evolution of home brewing has been to try to mimic the larger systems, but only on a smaller scale. And it seems like that to use the old corporate corporate speak word, it was a paradigm shift to go from a 3-vessel system to just brewing in a single vessel on the patio or in the kitchen or whatever. And it was such a radical break that there were opponents in the beginning. What kind of pushback did you guys get in the beginning, Pat?
Well, actually, I didn't notice much of that. I mean, before I was talking about the guy that did the full volume mash in the esky, his name's Andrew Queensland on Aussie Home Brewer, and actually all the traditional brewers I found really helpful in the beginning. So I think probably what happens on these forum environments is you probably get one or two people make a lot of noise, and that's what sticks. But really, I honestly found the all-grain brewers doing 3-vessel brewing really helpful in the early process. So, and if you read through the early threads, I mean, you won't see too many problems there at all. So that might be one of the myths of BIAB, but I'm not too sure how it's going over in America if you're having those sort of arguments between what's best between 3-vessel and full volume brewing. But I mean, we did have those from time to time, but yeah, certainly I found people more helpful than anything else.
It's probably the people that have spent the most money on their gear that are
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that's a big ask. If someone spent a lot of money on their gear, of course you're not going to want to go and change anything. But we did have one guy who's crusty, and he spent about $4,000 on the rim system, everything, and he spent hours building it. And now he brews in an electric urn, and he loves it. He thinks it makes him better beer. So that's a pretty nice. There's a few stories like that. There's quite a few of us. As we heard, Bob was ex-all-grain or 3-vessel brewer. I'm same with myself. And there's quite a few of us around now. So I'm always take my hats off to those people that are 3-vessel. They're willing to have a try at the full volume brewing.
Well, I look at brew in a bag as kind of another tool in the toolkit, because on higher gravity beers, I still pull out the mash tun just because I want to save my back. I don't have a pulley system on the ceiling of my garage, to pull the bag out and all that. So, part of it is kind of laziness on my part. But, so I look at it as just another option for me to use depending on what I'm brewing.
Yeah, Yeah, the pulley definitely. I mean, I didn't have a pulley for the first 2 years, and I was sometimes doing double batches, and especially if you've got a very, very fine bag, that can be pretty tiring. If you've got a less coarse bag, then it's not too bad. But certainly the pulley, I can't imagine going back to the old days of, I nearly do double batches on every one, but I love the pulley. Can't beat it.
Yeah, my next step is to take the pulley and hook it up to the garage door opener. So when I open and close the garage door, it pulls the bag out of the ton there.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, that's genius.
And the light goes on too. So
you just got to get finished in about 2 minutes that it takes for the light to go off.
Yeah.
So, Bob, kind of comparing to, I mean, if it's hard to imagine that people don't know what brew in a bag is by now, but compare and contrast your brew in a bag setup with your old 3-vessel system for those newbies out there who are not aware.
Well, originally I started on the stove with a 30-quart pot or so, but I had a boil over on a brand new smooth top stove. So I was kicked out of the house, and I ended up getting a 15-gallon beer keg and doing it that way. But with the 3-vessel, you got 3 heights that you have to have. You have your sweet liquor tank. You have your mash tun, and I'll tell you, it was a lot of work for me, and I had a lot of problems just with the simple things. Just when you're mashing out and trying to get those temperatures right, I was horrible at that. I know I'm not really giving you the full story there, but let me say this: I was miserable sometimes. Even though I love making beer, I was miserable because I couldn't get the temperatures right, and I would be way off, 7, 8, 10 degrees. And when brewing the bag started, and I found out it was easy to go, and it took off. This is the part where you cut it out.
This is the creative editing.
Yeah, creative editing.
So Pat, let me ask you. I mean,
ask him. Yeah,
compare and contrast brew in a bag to the 3-vessel system. I mean, the pros and the cons. Give us the cloud of that.
Yeah. Well, I've spent probably nearly 8 years now trying to find cons to it, and I'm at the stage now where I'm not going to say there are any cons. I just really cannot find them. It's less equipment. It's a very fast to learn method. You have great control. You can control your temperatures very easily, hit them easily, as Bob was talking about. If you've got a pulley system, you can do step mashes extremely easily. I just can't find anything you can't do in it. We're certainly not seeing a loss in quality. We're doing extremely well in competitions. In any side-by-sides I've done with 3-vessel, basically no one has been able to tell the difference. In fact, I think in one side-by-side, the only person who could tell the difference said that the bagged beer was actually, the full volume beer was less astringent than the other beer. So there's really, I think, any cons out there are probably misconceptions and myths. So I certainly can't think of anything myself. It's a lovely way to brew, and in fact, the more that my mind becomes open, because I'm very careful. I want to get the right information out there. But yeah, after nearly 8 years, I actually can see quite the mash being more even. You've got the even temperature throughout the mash. You're not sucking a whole lot of sugars out of one part of the grain bed. It's all very even. So I'm not surprised that we're not seeing any compromise in quality at all.
Yeah, I can tell from my experience. I mean, there's no with fly sparging where you're adding more sparge water as you're lautering out or as you're draining out the wort. You've got to worry about channeling. In other words, the water taking the path of least resistance through the mash and not rinsing out all the sugars. And I stepped up from fly sparging stepped over. I don't want to say stepped up, but stepped over to batch sparging. in part to get rid of that worry. And then brew in a bag with the traditional way of brewing the bag, you are putting the entire water from the brewing process into the mash at once, and then you don't sparge at all, and then you pull out the bag, you pull out the grain, right? I mean, that's the traditional way of doing things, and people have modified
That's the exact name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a lot of. I mean, being one of the pioneers, obviously, it's a big shame to see a lot of people on forums. You see, if I sparge, I'll get better results. What's happened is that you'll often see on forums as well that people say that BIAB's not as efficient as other methods, whereas actually the truth is it's actually a little bit more efficient than batch sparging, a little bit less than fly sparging. And the reason for that is because you've got no dead ton space in your mash tun. You've got the beautiful manifold that's all draining evenly. There are a couple of the reasons for it, and you get much less liquor retained by the grain. But what happens, I think, is a very good example of how myths get spread. There's a certain method of brewing called no sparge brewing. And if you research it, you'll actually find that the George Fix was asked, he was a well-respected brewing scientist, he and another scientist were asked, how would you make the best beer? And he said, well, what I would do is I wouldn't do a sparge. And what he actually meant is he would use the mash water and allow that to touch the grain, but the sparge water that would normally be used to rinse the grain would not even touch the grain. It would be put straight into the kettle. So, but unfortunately, you can read in very respected sites that no sparge means... the first issue is that this no sparge method would produce a higher quality beer, in their opinion, because there wasn't so much being sucked out of the grain, if you like, just the goodness was being taken out. But also, the problem with that was you had to use a lot more grain because you weren't washing the grain very well. It's like putting a pair of dirty jeans in a bucket of water and trying to get them clean in a bucket of water compared to putting it into a big, huge tub of water. Obviously, the more water you use, the cleaner you can get the jeans, and grain brewing is no different. The more water that hits the grain, the cleaner it gets. So, unfortunately, what happened was people said that BIAB is a no-sparge brewing method, and it's actually not. It's actually a brewing method where the mash and the sparge happen to happen at the same time. So we would call it a brewing method with a passive sparge, or a hidden sparge, if you like. But unfortunately, when people go and research no sparge now, they'll come up with articles that say that no sparge is when you mash with a bit of water and then you quickly put the sparge water through the grain, and that is actually incorrect. But of course, there's a lot of incorrect advice on the internet, unfortunately. So I'm not too sure if that makes sense, but and that's one of the things we're learning in BIAB is because it's such a transparent system. There's not there's a bit of water going in here, there's a bit of water going there, there's a bit of terminology we use for this. We can actually see very clearly what happens in BIAB, and you're aware that in like existing brewing software that you have to set up an equipment profile and you'll put in 70% as your kettle efficiency or 85% as your kettle efficiency. And that tells the program of all your brews, you are going to theoretically get 80% kettle efficiency. Well, what we've been able to do is write a new program and have it so, which is much more realistic. What it does is it says that if you're doing a very high gravity brew, your grain is getting washed with far less water than if you're doing a low gravity brew. And so we have this automatic calculation that automatically adjusts and says, okay, well, this high gravity brew, you're not going to be as efficient as if you're doing a low gravity brew. In other words, so what we're doing is it's so much easier to learn about brewing because you can see that, a lot of these things that we think are fixed numbers are actually variables.
It's a sliding scale.
very much so. So, yeah.
And
that's it. All these things in hindsight, we talked about paradigm shifts before, I think this is all going to be very much standard knowledge in a few years' time. But we've put a lot of work into it. There's a guy called Stuart Espy who put a lot of work on just working out the original variable formula, and then we were able to improve it. And so it's been quite a long process of discovering what I'm now thinking of as being quite obvious things.
And you mentioned that you're working on a piece of software. Do you want to give a plug where people can learn more about that? I know it's a work in progress at this point.
Yeah, well, we're pretty much, unfortunately, I've had to put it into a spreadsheet type of setup because it's taken quite a few years to even write. But hopefully we'll find some way of getting it coded into a proper program, and that way we can make it a little bit easier to use, because what we've actually done is put pretty much everything you need on one page. So when you change your number, you can see how it affects everything else instead of having to click to another tab and then go back and forth. With this program, I wanted to actually be an educational tool. That was a big priority of it. But it is it's revolutionary. As I said, we've got automatic efficiency estimates. It automatically estimates trube. So, for example, a new beginner, a new all-grain brewer, I can send them a recipe, and all they've basically got to do is put in the height of their kettle and the diameter of their kettle, and on their first brews, that's all they need. Everything else will be automatically estimated for them. The estimates are very good, and after they've done 5 or 6 brews, they might go, oh, well, I'm getting a little bit more evaporation than was estimated, or I'm getting a little more trube, and they can change that. But basically they can grow in to learning about all-grain brewing slowly and gradually but they can get underway straight away. They don't have to sit and read thousands of pages of confusing instructions. They can just get in there and brew straight away.
So is it available online? Where can people find it?
Oh, yeah. I think at the moment I've got the last thing I need to do is write the help to it, and that'll probably take another 2 or 3 weeks because I want to have that very fast to use. But you can go to biabrewer.info, and at the moment there, I think you have to become a member and perhaps even make a first post to download that file, the BIAB. But we'll probably change that down the track once I'm sure that everything's working nicely. But it is a spreadsheet, so there's a lot of limitations to it, as in ease of use. But once you learn the limitations, and like we don't have drop-down lists for grains, and in fact, I don't think that is a limitation. I think that's actually quite a good thing because it forces people to think about what they're putting in, what they're typing in. So the whole thing's taken, thousands of hours to actually design and lay out. But and one of the building blocks of it was simple terminology, because that causes masses of problems for new brewers.
That's right. There's a whole new language you have to learn. But I want to mention I want to spell out the URL. It's BIABREWER.info. Is that right?
That's the one. Yeah.
So it's brew in a bag brewer, but the B is shared. But
it's only one B. Yes. Yes. I sort of regret the day that we sort of went by it, because if there was some nice way of saying full volume brewing, that would be a better description. But or full volume single vessel brewing. But anyway, you've come up with these names, and of course they tend to stick.
Now you did mention trube, and that's one place that I seem to get more trube in brew in a bag batches than in traditionally sparged batches, just because in my observation at least, they're in a traditional mash tun, it goes the grain provides a filter bed, and when you louder and you vorl off, and there are all these terms. You're right, Pat. But when you do the traditional sparging, there's more of a filtering that takes effect. Do you guys see the same thing?
Well, for me, it's been so long since I did 3 vessel, I wouldn't even know about being able to compare them. But I don't see where it's that much more different. But I really couldn't say. It's been that long since I've done a 3-vessel to say, but it makes sense the way you said it because of the filtering by the grains, or if you put rice in or something, rice hulls. It seems like it's cleaner when it comes out, but yet when it comes to finished beer, they're crystal clear.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a bit with Bob on this. I think that a couple of things are, a lot of people are using grain bags that are actually too coarse. Like paint strainer bags are really too coarse for BIAB brewing. But so that could be one problem. But I suppose the issue here is that even if the wort going into the boil is cloudier than traditional brewing, it's actually not a negative anyway. So it's not. It's a myth that having a cloudy wort is a problem. And in fact, I can't remember the source, but there's one source that says that's actually quite a good thing, and that's from a proper brewing scientist again. So it's not something that doesn't. I don't actually even think of that anymore.
I'm not afraid of the trub.
Yeah.
In fact, even going into the fermenter, I'm fairly greedy, and I'll use a clarifier, and I'll do a whirlpool, and I'll let the wort settle, and then during the first 3/4 of transferring the wort from the kettle to the fermenter with a siphon, my kettle doesn't have a spigot. So I'd siphon with an auto siphon. During the first 3/4, it's nice and clear, and I'm thinking, boy, that is beautiful looking wort. And then, toward the end, it starts to get a little cloudy, and I look at the level in my fermenter, and I'm like, I'm just going to be greedy. I can't.
Yeah, there's I'm never too sure what advice to give people on how much trub to put in. There's people that I know that just go, no, they've done brewing degrees, etc., and they go, no, never ever do that, and they'll write pages on why you shouldn't do it. And I think a lot of these things, I think we've all got different palates, and maybe some people are very good at tasting some things, and other people can't taste other things. Maybe in some beer styles it doesn't matter at all, and maybe in other beer styles it does matter. I just really don't have that knowledge.
We talking about misunderstandings and myths. One of the hard and fast rules that you get into when you get into brewing with steeping grains and extracts is never squeeze the bag that you hold the steeping grains in, because you'll release astringency into the beer. And using brew in a bag, I squeeze the heck out of the bag. I have these nice thick rubber gloves that are made for barbecuing, and just picking up the barbecue right out of the barbecue pit. And I use those to squeeze the bag, and I don't get an astringency. Are you guys bag squeezers?
Well, I'm a squeezer from way back.
I'm just lazy. I just let it hang above the kettle until the boil starts, and that's it. See, that's the end of it. Actually, I don't. I actually dump mine in a little bucket and let it just hang above the bucket. Well, then as soon as the boil starts, boom, whatever I've got goes in. I give it a bit of a squeeze, and you definitely need. You want to use gloves. It makes things so much easier. But really, you can spend a lot of time squeezing. You can. I've heard of people letting their bag hang during the boil, and it's like, no, just look. That's your cut-off point. Is the beginning of the boil. Get the wort in there. It needs to be boiled. And as for the astringency, the theory is that if your temperatures and pH are correct, that you won't get astringency. I think that's why you can do, I think that's why you can do decoction mashing, etc., and not get the astringency problem. But so as long as your pH and your temperatures are right, and you're not going above that 78C, which is, I'll click on my little converter here.
I think it's 170 or so.
Is it? Okay. Then you're fine. But one thing I'm a bit worried about with brew in a bag is I'm seeing a lot of advice for people saying they should crush their grain extremely fine. And I don't think that's brilliant advice. I'm just wondering if they're crushing it to powder. I'm thinking that it's going to retain a lot of the sweet liquor, which is what we call the water that we've managed to suck the sugars from the grain. So I imagine it retains a lot of sweet liquor. I'm not too sure about that. But my main worry is, a grain is a bit of wood with all the nice stuff inside. And really what we want to do is just split that wood a little bit so there's enough room for the sugars to leach out. So I reckon, we've got to be very careful with numbers. You hear that, if your pH doesn't go above such and such and your temperature doesn't go above such and such, you will not get any tannins. Well, I think all these things are a sliding scale. And if you go and chop up all those bits of wood that's in the grain, the lignin, and into tiny pieces, I think you could get an astringency problem. I don't know, but I'm very wary about, I'm always very uncomfortable seeing that, just double crush your grain. You don't need to double crush your grain. And in fact, every mill's different. Some mills you do have to double crush because grain slips into, depending on the way they're knurled, grain can slip through them without getting crushed. But if you've got a good roller, then, pretty much every grain should be getting crushed. So once again, a lot of this advice gets pumped out there, and often it's the reason you hear for people crushing fine is, my efficiency improves so much. And what happens is when we're starting out, often, like say with BIAB, we'd usually start, because we're reading all this stuff and in the wrong places, we'd start with a 60-minute mash and probably a 60-minute boil. But you want to be doing a 90-minute mash. If you look at traditional brewing, they're doing a 60-minute mash, but then they're mucking around for half an hour or more doing their sparging. So the grain is being exposed to water for 90 minutes. Now, if you just chop it off at 60 minutes, then you're cutting off a lot of you're leaving a lot of sugar. You're not allowing the time for the sugars to leach out of the grain. So what happens is people don't realise, but the same time as they've read something about a double crush, or they'll go and do their next brew with the double crush, but they'll mash for 90 minutes. Their efficiency goes up, their kettle efficiency, and they think it was due to the maybe finer crush. Or that's a good one that you see with the sparging, which is another big issue in BIAB for the pioneers, is seeing the idea of BIAB is it's a full volume single vessel brewing method. And you'll see in many posts on forums, sparging improves my efficiency with BIAB. And it's actually not the case. And the reason I know that's not the case is because I actually have two setups here. And so I do side-by-side brews, and I'm quite careful in testing things out before I go publishing things. But I've done multiple side-by-side brews, full volume versus sparging, and noticed no difference in the kettle efficiency. And that's a pretty hard mental thing. This is one of these new paradigm things, and you think, well, how can that be? How can that be? How can you possibly not get better efficiency when you're rinsing the grain? But that's been an interesting cycle. I've tried for years trying to get the right analogy to explain how it works. But remember we talked about jeans and washing them before in a bit of water? I think what happens, because we've all got clothes washing machines at home, we think that brewing and mashing and sparging are a bit like that. We think mashing is, the washing bit with the detergent, and then you do your spin cycle, which is your sparging. But in brewing, we actually don't have a spin cycle. There's no, the grain's not getting spun around and around every bit of grain, water getting extracted from the grain. So we don't have that. So in fact, all we're really doing is exposing our grain to water. And it doesn't matter if you add half the water now and half the water later, or all the water now. It doesn't matter at the end result. The same amount of dirt or sugar, the dirt will be washed out of the jeans, if you like.
It's interesting because it is, I've been sparging. I have sinned. I have been sparging my brew in a bag batches because, I'll just reserve, say, a gallon of water and heat it up to 170 degrees, and take my bag out of the main kettle and put it in the smaller kettle and swish it about and rinse it, and the water changes color, and you could tell that there's something in there. But I haven't done a side-by-side. I haven't taken a gravity of that sparge water to see, how much I'm actually getting out. So
it's a real mental thing. Well, but the trick is you have to do the side-by-side because, when you're doing the smudging, you'll see there's colour in there for sure. But if you'd had that water in the initial batch would have just come out a little bit darker. Yeah, I mean, so when you put the two together, it's the same end result. It's a very hard thing to try and sort of mentally get your head around, especially for those of us who've been involved in 3-vessel brewing, because it's very much we're programmed to think, sparging's where all the sugars get taken out. But you can imagine if you put your dirty jeans into one big bucket, all right, and you're just going to lift them up and down for half an hour in the big bucket, then hang them out to dry. You could do the same thing in 2 half buckets, put them in the half bucket, lift it up. That first lot of water is going to get really dirty. Now put the jeans in the second bucket and lift them up and down. That water is going to get less dirty, but it's still going to get dirty. But add those 2 half buckets together and you'll find that you end up with the same result as if you just use the one big bucket. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think it does. But Pat, we all know from all the brewing texts that we read when we were learning about all grain, that a thinner mash, a higher water to grain ratio will result in a thinner beer.
Oh,
I'll have to pull out malting and brewing science books, I think, for that one. That's one of these little myths that Home Brew World has that totally disagrees with brewing literature. I don't know how these things start. It's quite weird.
Yeah, I mean, my first brew in a bag batch, I think my water to grain ratio, I mean, I've gone as high as 4, and forgive me, I don't have the conversions, but 4 quarts per pound.
Oh, I've got that converter here, yeah.
And so very, very thin mash, and it scared me because I thought, well, this is going to be a really thin beer, and at the end of it, it wasn't at all.
Yeah, 4 quarts per pound, that's 8.35 litres a kilo. And that's, like a pretty standard sort of brew in a bag, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and the standard, when I was learning about all grain, the standard was, 1.5 quarts per pound?
I think it is something like that. Yeah, I think 1.5, 1.25 is the lowest, I think, from memory. Then I think it starts getting a little bit too stiff to get anything out. But I think 1.5 to 2, I think, might be normal off the top of my head, quarts per pound.
I mean, I've used 1 quart per pound just for the ease of figuring things out, and it works.
Does it? Okay.
It does well, yeah.
With the sparge afterward, of course, yeah.
Yeah, for a wheat beer, you probably want to thin that out a bit more. But like I say, if you can get a satisfying beer as far as mouthfeel goes with as high as 4 quarts per pound, of a mash, there's something that we learned incorrectly in the beginning.
Yes, I don't know how. I mean, I'm sorry, I should have looked that up. And it definitely contradicts normal brewing literature. So, I'm not too sure how that particular myth started. Most of them I can track down. I mean, there's a lot of myths that, for example, another thing in brewing is you'll see in forum posts, my efficiency improved by 12% when I did this. Now, if you ask the brewer what efficiency are you talking about, they generally won't know because the education on it is extremely poor. But there's basically 2 types of efficiencies. There's a kettle efficiency, which is the useful efficiency, and then there's a fermenter efficiency, which unfortunately a lot of software is designed around that. And also there's another problem because in a lot of software there were errors, and in many bits of software there are still errors in their formulas. So, for example, if you put a colour, your colour and your IBU formulas were wrong. So you'd say that you wanted a batch of 5 gallons, and you were going to have 1 gallon of kettle trube, then that means you've got 6 gallons at the end of the boil. Now, let's say that's what you get with your equipment, James, and with my equipment, I get 5 gallons into my fermenter, but I only get, say, 1/3 of a gallon of trube. I'm actually going to need less hops in my recipe than you are. Okay? So what happens, though, is people are finding if I change my trube to, 5 million gallons, the formulas are still coming out the same. So people start to manipulate these programs, and they type in their equipment profile that they had 0 trube. So you would type in 6 gallons as your batch size, which in a particular program might have meant volume into fermenter, but now you are using it to mean volume at the end of the boil, or what we call volume of ambient wort. So unfortunately, we've got this whole problem where there's this miscommunication because of poor terminology. You say efficiency, you have to say, are you talking kettle efficiency or fermenter efficiency? If you say batch size, you can't use that term anymore. It's become meaningless. You need to explain when I say batch size, I mean volume into fermenter, or I mean my volume at the end of the boil once it's chilled, which we call volume of ambient wort. And these are extremely critical terms. I mean, basically you cannot copy a recipe correctly unless you can work out the volume of ambient wort from the recipe report, which in probably about 97% of recipes that you see published, even in books, you cannot determine that figure. So there's a lot of people giving this great respect and worshipping numbers, and the numbers are actually quite, basically people are reading them the way they think that they should mean. One person by batch size means their volume into fermenter, another one means their end of boil volume once it's chilled, but they think that both of them are talking the same language, and they're not. So I've noticed it's a major, major problem with our world. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to fix that over the last few years.
And here's where I get up on my soapbox and have my little pet peeve. You can tell when a recipe has been designed in a piece of brewing software.
Yeah.
Because the amounts of measurements, like a little smidge of this grain and a little smidge of that grain and a little smidge of this hop. It's because I think that people get into the recipe, and instead of thinking, what do I want this beer to be as far as cooking, the paradigm of cooking,
yes,
they look and they say, okay, what are the gravities that fit within the style guidelines? What's the color of the beer that's going to fit within the style guidelines? And if they put their recipe in and it doesn't match within these little parameters that are defined on the sliders of these recipe programs, then they throw in a little bit of chocolate malt, or they throw in, and so exactly. It's like, what? That's not how you cook. That's not.
I'm so tempted. I was so tempted in the BIAB to just not have any colour formulas because they're actually flavour. They're flavour grains. There's very few grains with colour that don't contribute. Like roasted barley contributes a major flavour. And as you said, these people adjust things, and no, don't worry about the colour. Worry about the flavour.
I mean, you see these long lists of these little bitty amounts, and it's frustrating because I go to the homebrew store to help out Andy every now and then, and people walk up with these recipes with a list of ingredients as long as your arm, and the and the amounts of the ingredients are just a shake of this and a shake of that. And they want, and of course they want to duplicate the recipe exactly because it's a clone of this beer. And so, we're, in my opinion, we're sacrificing a bit of our creativity, being slaves to the sliders on the style guideline parameters of these brewing programs. So now I'll step off my soapbox and.
Well, I think that's a major point. I mean, if you look, I'll let Bob jump in on here in a second, but I find the hardest thing is that, like, new brewers, they need some guidelines. And numbers are great. If you can give them safe numbers, and they are, they're not just, they make sense, and they are logical. It gives them a starting point. But at the same time, we like to try and teach people that numbers aren't accurate. You always say to people, I'm just trying to get my process down repeatable. Well, you're not going to get it repeatable. A commercial brewery cannot make their brews exactly the same without doing adjustments on every single brew. So that's another homebrew myth. Your evaporation changes on every brew, especially if you brew outside. Mm-hmm. The mash you're getting from a shop changes in its sugar content and specs, etc. So we're trying to give people nice figures and give them an easy-to-learn terminology, etc. But at the same time, get them to, at the same time as respecting numbers, we also want them to be giving them as disrespecting the numbers as well. And you get people, when you get to a certain stage, many brewers are like Bob, and he basically would very rarely use numbers. He just knows intuitively, this brew, I want to add a little bit of this, or add a little bit of this, or in that recipe that I've seen somewhere on the net, well, that bit doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to ignore it because I know that half the recipes on the internet don't make any sense, but that bit there makes sense, so I'll throw that in. I mean, Bob's very, he's right up on that.
Now, Bob is very scientific in what he does.
Oh, right, yeah. Buy a bag of this and throw it in the water and see what happens. Actually, really, for a new brewer, whether it's brewing a bag or anything, really, it'd be nice to start off with a smash beer, a single malt and single hop, and work from there, and learn the efficiencies of that, and not follow these crazy recipes that have 43, 2 grams of this, 2 grams of that. You're never going to get it right. Start with a simple recipe, make sure you got it going good, and then you can maybe, move on from there a little bit. But, that's the beauty of brewing the bag, that it's fairly simple. And if you start off with the simple setup, with a simple beer, you'll feel comfortable right away, and you're going to have good beer.
I agree.
Yeah. And hopefully make a big error at some stage early in a piece, and then you go, oh, the beer still tastes great.
Yeah. You still got beer.
Yeah. I love it when people do that.
Yeah, a lot of times when I publish a recipe that has weird amounts of ingredients, it's because that's what I had on hand. I only had a partial bag of chocolate malt, or I only had a little bit of this, and so I weighed it out and I wrote it down, and that's what I put in the kettle or in the mash tun, which in this case is the kettle. And then I published the recipe just because that's what I had, and then people around the listening area are trying to duplicate that recipe that was an accident on my part.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I love the one. There's a great experiment. I'll send you a link to it, James. But there was a competition where they weighed out and sent, I think it was 20 or 30 different brewers, all the ingredients, grain, hops for a brew, gave them exactly the same recipe. Then they've scientifically measured everything. And it was so funny because the results were all wildly different. So I'll send that to you because you'd find that quite interesting, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's tough. It's like when you're first learning how to cook, and you want to make spaghetti sauce. Let's say you go to a recipe book, and then you measure out exactly a quarter teaspoon of oregano, or an eighth of a teaspoon of this, and it's and if you get a little bit more in there, you panic. Oh no, I've ruined it. Instead, because you don't have a footing, you don't know what each of these ingredients does. And I think Bob's approach of starting simple with a smash beer, single malt and single hop, to see how that tastes, and then change one variable in the equation, say change the hops, and then see how that tastes. And then you start to get your footing, and you're just more confident on what all these ingredients do. Like, an experienced cook, when they're cooking, like when I watch Steve cook, and when you see video of it, of Steve cooking on the show, he's just tossing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and and it's difficult for him afterwards to formulate the recipe because the recipe on a printed page has to be fairly exact, but that's not the way it was born. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if also, but there's no existing, sorry, the terminology that exists today and the programs are very, they're not that great actually. So there's not really the tools available for the artists to convey their information to others easily anyway. So hopefully we'll see that change over the coming years.
Brewing will always be ballpark brewing because you never can get those exact
right.
the same grains. I mean, you buy the grain, 2 pounds of grain in the store. You don't know if one of those bags has been sitting there for a year and a half and the other one just came in fresh. Using the recipe, they taste wildly different. You followed it, you hit your temperatures, you got everything right, you even split the yeast, reuse the yeast, but they taste different. Well, one bag in your left hand was a year old and in your right was brand new. You never get it right. And like for me in winter, I notice when the steam starts coming up in the kettle, I can't even see my boil. I'm guessing, how vigorous it is, and that makes a difference in the end. You're somehow you're short or you got too much wort at the end, and you go like, well, I couldn't even see in there, and it's not good to lick your finger and stick it in there and see where the bubbles are,
Yeah, there's another thing. I mean, you often see advice. I just, make sure just start your boil time when your gravity reaches, such and such. Well, I'll tell you what, measuring gravities, I can have a brew day here and give everyone a hydrometer or a refractometer and say, go and measure that wort, and there'll be great differences between what everyone writes down. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these things are quite subjective, but it's no use knowing the starting gravity of your boil because you cannot predict the evaporation on that day. So there's a lot of advice, you think, no, just make your plan, brew your beer, and be very comfortable at the end making some corrections if it needs be. But I would hardly ever do any corrections except doing a bit of top-up water in my fermenter. That's all I ever do.
Yeah, that's the beauty of home brewing is the variability, in my opinion. And especially because I don't enter contests, so I'm not trying to impress anybody, but my friends who I share my beer with. Well, guys, this has been fun. I think we covered most of the points that we wanted to get across, and this may be the first of a series of conversations. We don't know. If people have specific questions about brewing a bag that they want this little round table to cover, send those in, and it'd be a good excuse for us to get back together again.
Yeah, no, that's
great. It'd be wonderful.
But so one other thing I was just thinking of, though, so one of the nice things to see with BIAB is when I first started out on Aussie Home Brew, we'd probably have one post maybe once a month if we were lucky about someone starting all grain. And now these days I think it's great because you see someone starting all grain every day. Yeah. So that's a nice, exciting thing to see in the game. Yeah.
So you guys are doing good work. Well, my club is almost virtually all brewing the bag now, and I started, and I was the only one. I was the oddball, and I'm still the oddball, but I got a lot of brewing the bag brewers with me now.
So they're all in the bag.
Yes, quite often, yes. Well, either half in or all the way in.
Well, thanks, guys. This is fun.
Thanks, James.
Thank you very much, James. And you guys have a great day.
Well, thanks again to Pat and Bob. That was a fun conversation. And once again, head over to BIABREWER.info for more details and interactions about brewing a bag. And I hope we can find another reason to get together with those guys soon. In the meantime, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com. or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You will find our bottle openers on our shop again. Our Basic Brewing growler bags are available as well. You can check out our support link, where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site, along with our combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And for a limited time, you do get a free bottle opener with any of our DVD combos. And you can check out our shirts in the store as well. Our brewers' logbooks are also in the store. Keep keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. And you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Nutiva Organic Shelled Hemp Seed, 3-pound bag, and Rock On Holographic Wrapping Paper. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brewer Your Own magazine through our associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production now for Basic Brewing Radio, and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.